Hello, hello, testing 1, 2, 3.
Apologize. Yeah, you're working.
Okay, all right, good. Okay. Okay, we're having technical difficulties we're trying to sort out here. How about now, Corey? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, consent calendar, Melissa?
Okay. Consent, we call.
We did.
Okay.
Oh, we do?
No.
No, it's Sally Rhodes.
No.
Morning, Sally. I think you're muted.
No, I can finally hear you. My hand was saying I could finally hear you. Thank you.
So no comment?
No comment, no.
Okay,
Public forum?
public forum, yeah. Anybody else, Corey?
Not that's indicated now.
How about here in the live audience? Anybody else? Okay. Now we can go to consent calendar. Melissa.
Okay, item number 1, minutes of the regular board meeting of March 28th, 2023. Item number 2, approval of reimbursement claims for director's statement of meetings attended and for travel expenses and claim summary for March 2023. Item number 3, amend current TUD water conservation contingency plan phase 2 to phase 1.
Would any director like to pull any of the items on the consent calendar? Director Ringen.
Claim summary.
Claim summary, you got it. Anybody else? Okay. Shall we go ahead and vote on, well, we can wait till he's done, right? Okay, Director Ringen, go ahead.
Okay, page 1 of 23, AB Tech Technologies Incorporated, $11,000. What is that about?
Is it pronounced Abtech? Oh, Abtech. That's our cyber
What is it?
recovery solution.
Oh, okay, thank you. On page 9, I just shake my head when I see these things. Department of Water Resources, $46,895 annual dam fees. What in the world are they doing to deserve to get that kind of money every year?
On address it or it's not here, it is an annual fee. Also received a letter that next year it's going up 8%.
Oh, great.
So, whoops, thank you. Sorry, I'll repeat that. These are annual fees for the specific dams that are subject to them. And we have received notification that the fees for next year will be going up 8%.
So where are we going to be at when we acquire PG&E? That should be really interesting.
Another 2 dams. Yeah, I can't estimate or project that. I'm not sure all the different types of dams, types of fees. We haven't been provided that information. So
Right.
these are the existing ones that we've had for ever since we took over these dams.
That's just highway robbery as far as I'm concerned. Page 12, Granicus. $15,789. Why? Don't use Granicus anymore. That I understood.
Corey, would you like to elaborate?
Currently, that's a renewal that does do agenda management. Video sharing, they still post videos. We'll be looking at removing the video hosting and just going to make it only this coming year, but until then, they have to do the renewing.
Okay, thank you.
Next year, we anticipate that it.
And we have been looking at this for a number of years now. It involves Melissa directly as well as Corey, but it's all related to this room, this board, how that's handled, what's required to be documented, what's required to be reviewed, how we do our agendas, how we post things. So we had a multiple year contract with Granicus. It started a couple general managers ago. And Corey has been working with us and Melissa to see what our options are. Going to YouTube was a big move that helped us with the Granicus recording. And also we're looking at this next contract, how we can do things differently. So we're watching it. We're looking for every, option to reduce that expense, but it's costly.
Yeah, no kidding. And then,
Follow up on that.
sure,
You say that's in relationship to this room, so that's actually based on 2 meetings a month?
Correct. And any other addition meetings or whatever.
Okay, so any special, so maybe up to.
I mean,
yeah, 3 or
the software costs and the ability, regardless whether we have a meeting every week or we don't have a meeting or whatever. Most of this has to do just with the ability to record, whether, it's 1 meeting a month or 2 or 10 or whatever it is. So.
That really drives up the cost of that when you look at it
kidding.
as to what the coverage actually is.
All right, and then the last thing, I learned something new this month, looking through the claim summary. It's real easy to figure out how much snowfall we've had. Because all you gotta do is see how many square nose shovels and snow shovels that we bought. And I think we got probably the majority of them in Tuolumne County in order to keep the ditch flowing. So anyway, that's it.
So that's why I couldn't find one when I went to the store.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. Alrighty.
We also supplied them to the Delta crews that came out here and helped us. So
Yeah, well, I
went
mean,
to them home.
it was all hands on deck.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I understand. So anyway, that's it for me.
Okay. There's nothing else on the consent calendar. I'll entertain a motion.
And I'll second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Any other discussion? If not, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Regular business, Melissa.
Okay, item number 4, discussion regarding storm-related damage.
Good.
All right, well,
Gadiel.
President, members of the board, members of the public, good morning. This is Eric Johnson, your district engineer. While Gadiel's getting set up here, I'd like to just make a few comments, somewhat for Director Jacobs' benefit, but just to frame the conversation today. So back in 2012, the TUD board adopted the Phoenix Lake Preservation Restoration Plan. It was prepared by a consultant. It was the genesis was a lot of work with the community and interested parties, property owners around the lake, as well as other members of the community. That plan eventually resulted in some grant funding. The district has invested a little over $6 million in improvements to Phoenix Lake, much of which you'll see here with Gadiel's pictures. But the overall plan had a price tag that was roughly $12 million back in 2012. So we were deficient in funding from the beginning. The work that was done was a partial realization of the overall vision of that plan. We did quite a bit of work. There's still work left to be done. This has, been discussed quite a bit with the community over the course of the last year. As you can see on the Zoom here, we have a few members of the public that have been very active in this regard. But our focus today is really more about the damage that has been sustained as a result of a very intense winter, a historically intense winter, if you will. And if we want to talk about kind of the remaining work that may be best done in a different meeting at a different time, we can certainly do that. But what we can say is earlier this year, we submitted a grant application for dredging the remaining portions of the lake, which is about a $21 million project. But today, our agenda item is informational only. We're not asking for any action from this board. And our focus is on 3 areas which are listed in your agenda staff report. The extent of the storm-related damage, the cost and availability of funding to make repairs, and some of the plans that we have moving forward to actually implement repairs. So that's what Gadiel is prepared to discuss today. And we're happy to answer any questions along the way. It's a pretty short PowerPoint.
Okay. Hello, I'm Gadiel Dimate, Associate Engineer here at the district. Nice to see you all again. I have a little PowerPoint for you here. As you guys know, it's been raining this year. Something wrong. I can't advance my slide. Oh, shit. Okay, maybe that was it. I'll reach. Bear with me, technical difficulties again. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Center mode now. Okay, let's see if it works this time. All right. So we've experienced a lot of rain, not just at Phoenix Lake, throughout our whole district. Just to give you a little bit of background here, of course, you know, we had 11 atmospheric rivers this year. Up to today, we have 49 inches of total rainfall. 20 inches came in January alone, which is very high intensity. That's 180% of normal for this year. Had severe winter storms that included and that caused flooding, mudslides, high wind, and lightning. All of that caused damage to our facilities throughout our district. Aside from Phoenix Lake, we've experienced about $67,500 worth of. Okay. All the lightning strikes and mudslides and falls and so far. Turning our focus to damage at Phoenix Lake, I'd like to point out some lake anatomy here. Point my pointer here. What we're looking at, I'm going to get out of it. Okay. Now we can see my pointer. What we're looking at here is the North Pool of Phoenix Lake. I think most of you are familiar with it. Over here is Chicken Creek, a small creek that comes into Phoenix Lake. Over here is Sullivan Creek. That's by far the largest river that comes into Phoenix Lake. And right here is Power Creek. That's the TUD control flow that comes in Lake. Purpose of this pool is to capture sediment. We call it the North Pool. We also call it the sedimentation basin. Okay. In order for the water to get out, it has to flow up and over this hump. This hump right here, we call it the North Pool spillway. So the large sediment settles at the bottom of the pool, water flows up and over this hump. Okay. Normally, well, for the first 2 years, I think 3 winters so far since we built this pool. First 2 years, we had an average of about 350 cubic yards being deposited into the North Pool each. Okay, it was the first 2 years. To show the rest of the lake here, at the North Pool here, this is Sullivan Creek. This is what we call the water quality control berm, not to be confused with the North Pool spillway. Both of them do control water quality in the lake, except this called the water quality control berm. It's called that because it forces pool water to circulate over here, this area, or this pool, before it exits the lake. We've had some confusion on some semantics there with the public, so hoping to clear that up now. All right, that was the boring stuff. Let's see if this video works for us. We are fortunate enough to have a drone here at the district. We're also fortunate enough, it's less choppy, I promise, to get out there with the drone during peak flow. All right, so you can see the high velocity water whipping around that corner, going into the North Pool spillway. The erosion that it caused as we circle around. We can't fly the drone in the rain, but we were lucky enough to just stop raining and I got the drone in the air to take this video. We're over the North Pool right now, heading towards Sullivan Creek. That's Sullivan Creek. Forgot to point out the access road and traffic bowl, but the access road and the traffic bowl are both submerged underwater and somewhat high velocity water is going over them. Yep.
Do you prefer questions at the end or can we ask a few clarifying questions as we go?
Let's finish the video and then I'll take your question.
Okay.
All right, there we see the North Pool spillway, that channel in the middle, water's flowing out. The real problem is that the water is just much higher everywhere in the lake than we anticipated. I'll circle back to show you the access road that I'm talking about. Clarification on that, but the water is just really deep, really high, and really backed up all the way up to the mouth of Sullivan Creek. That's the main issue. I think that's the good part of the video there. Dr. Balin, you had a question?
Yeah, where Power Creek comes in, I noticed that there's two courses. One looks like it's been has drain rock on it, and the other looks like it's making a dog leg. You can see it in the drone shot.
Yeah.
So yeah, there we go.
Here, let me try to pause it.
Okay, thank you. All right. So where is it? Is it ditched there, and then there's an overflow? Help me understand the way that.
Great question. Let's see. So again, this is the north right here. This is our access road that we use to access the creek here, and also we're going to use it when we pull this sediment out of the lake. This was the traffic bulb right here. Call it traffic bulb. It's a place to stage material and turn around equipment like that. Kind of a dead end at the end of the access road. The water is supposed to come up Power Creek, come through this riprap channel, and go into the lake this way from Power Creek. From Sullivan Creek, it's supposed to go straight down this way and stay in this channel. Okay, but the water was so high, everything overtopped, and the water just consumed this whole area and was above the level of this access road as well. That answer your question?
So a couple of questions really quick. All right, so that is Power Creek is channelized, naturalized, manipulated water, correct?
I don't know what manipulated water is.
Pardon me?
Manipulated.
Oh, manipulated water, yes.
So is that a man-made course where it dog legs go and heads to the, I'll call it north or northeast, wraps around and ties in to Sullivan Creek? Is that that's man-made channel?
Yes.
Okay. All right, question, because that's quite a lot of velocity to hit a right angle, my opinion. Okay, then that channel coming in from the
Right here?
upper left. No, it's brown.
Oh, this.
What is that?
That is an area where the bulrush has been pushed down for one reason or another. And the elevation here is slightly higher than the elevation.
Okay, so that is not a channel.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
It floods during high rain. It's flooded in the video we just saw, but no, it's not an incoming.
Okay, and historically, was that the shoreline?
No, the shoreline at high water level during the summer isn't shown in this. It's going to be way back.
Wow, okay, thank you.
I have better pictures. I can point that out later.
Okay, you might have a question. I kind of want to see, I didn't understand Director Billen's question, nor your answer. So at some point, I'd like to see how Power Creek looked before storm and then after the storm.
absolutely.
maybe hear your question again.
No,
Direct.
a question on this for Powder Creek then as well. Did Powder Creek contribute to the sediment in the North Basin? I.e. was PG&E running that at high velocity during the storms?
No, Power Creek did not contribute significantly to the sediment in the basin.
Okay, so
As far as velocities go, I don't know what it was running, Eric Hall with.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, 30, maybe 30, 40 CFS. I mean, I know that Eric turned off the ditch, so a lot of it was
Okay.
stormwater coming in.
So the ditch was off, what the flow we were seeing in the video coming in was just rain that we don't have.
correct. And then the Sullivan's Creek then did the damage to the traffic bulb and the lower end of Powder Creek is what caused, and
Yes,
thank you.
all of this, most of the all of the erosion and almost all the sediment came from Power Creek.
So
Sorry.
So
Thank you, Sullivan Creek.
And Director, you had
Let
another
me
question?
open up.
Director Balin, to
Director Balin has
respond
a-
to your question.
Perhaps just for the record, you can explain what Power Creek is. And, you know, we've got Sullivan Creek watershed, but now we've got Power Creek. Can you explain what Power Creek really is?
I'll get to answering Dawn's question with this PDF. So Sullivan Creek's the natural creek that starts basically at Lakewood Lake up in Sugar Pine, and it goes into Phoenix Lake and it continues to Don Pedro. It's a natural drainage course. It's the biggest drainage course of that comes into Phoenix Lake. Power Creek actually brings water from one basin over, and it brings it from the PG&E controlled ditch through the powerhouse that's out in PG&E chicken diesel turkey ranch area. And after they use it to make power, they dump it into Phoenix Lake. Is that what you're looking for?
Right, and that's why it's clean. Relatively clean, and that's why it doesn't contribute to sediment, except as a fire hose to blow the sediment, disperse it as it's coming into. So just, you know, helping us get a big grown view of what's contributing and where the sediments.
Great, yeah. The spoiler alert is that we have 7,000 cubic yards of sediment in the North Pole today, and vast majority of that came from the Sullivan Creek drainage.
So I've been saying for years about how when we have real heavy rains, how Sullivan Creek is darn near out of control. I mean, it scours everything that is anywhere along the banks or whatever, and it all ends up in Phoenix Lake. As I've been wondering ever since I seen this, how this was laid out, why it's directed into that north pool, into that wall, that berm or whatever you want to call it, because it's like that's a recipe for disaster. It's just not going to work because there's just too much force in that water coming down Sullivan Creek. What I'd like to suggest is that this thing get redesigned so that for the repair, so that we don't have to go through this again, so that Sullivan Creek meets Chicken Creek, is that the right one?
Well, Sullivan Creek.
Well, Power Creek
over
and also, yeah,
Chicken Creek is kind of on the west.
right. But if you could run those together to break up that force of water and then have it spill over into the rest of the lake, you might not have this problem again. But when it goes directly into that raised area, it's going to wash it out every time unless you have some sort of armor there. I mean, real armor.
Yeah. Well, I'll show you some armoring that we are considering. That's that as well.
Yeah, I turned something into Dawn about a masonry armor. And I don't know whether that got considered or not, but that
know
is,
I got a natural biological plate based armor that you tested, and we did consider that. And we also considered a masonry. Well, I don't know if it's the same one. But we'll get to that too. Going back to Don's question, this is a before picture of the North Pool, and that's Sullivan Creek. Here's the traffic bowl before it washed out. Yeah. I think I have one more before. There it is again. Access road, traffic bowl, Power Creek behaving well, channelized where we want it to go. Sullivan Creek behaving well, channelized where we want it to go.
So what I didn't understand from Director Balin's, I just don't, from this picture, if you could restate your question and you restate your answer, please.
Okay, well, looking at the drone photos aerially, I'm looking at Power Creek, and I know that Power Creek takes that excess water after power was made. It's fairly clean and it drops it in. It's very important water for the watershed. But what it did is it made this right angle dog leg. It came up to the north and then back and back.
Yes.
I lost the
So it's
picture.
channelized confinement, for this drainage, we'll call it a random or something. There it is, okay.
You're referring to the way it's designed, it was supposed to come in here and then right angle down. That way you're,
Well, I'm looking at on the far left, there's another dog
this.
leg right there. Okay,
Okay.
so water's gonna hit that corner. I mean, you guys spent a lot of time, armoring that out, those outsides of those corners. In along the ditch system to take that force. And so I was just, so I couldn't tell where. I just needed some clarification, Dawn, on how Power Creek moves through this delta looking system. Then I saw the bulrush there and I go, well, maybe that looks more like a straight shot. Was that its natural course? Was this reconfigured? Then to merge with Sullivan? So those were my questions.
Right, and so thank you. I understand your question now. I don't remember the answer. So this dog leg Director Balin's talking about,
this one right here,
that always existed, or did we create that dog leg?
that always existed.
Always existed.
It's not armored. We didn't touch it at all during the construction. We started manipulating it here during the construction to route it to here.
I got you.
Thank you.
And this is the traffic bowl that was never supposed to be underwater. Well, during the winter time, supposed to be. And just to clarify, during the winter, we run Phoenix Lake at a lower elevation. And then during the summer, we fill it up 6 feet. Okay. Right, thank you. The traffic bowl is underwater during the summertime. There's low flows during the summertime, so it doesn't cause a problem. What's not supposed to happen is water to be flowing over this traffic bulb in the winter. Obviously.
Getty, I see we have a hand up.
We do Sally, I was waiting to you guys with public.
Oh,
Related to-
Okay.
Call.
sorry, I'll let you run.
Might be useful to get to the end of the presentation before public comment.
Okay.
So any more questions on that, Barbara?
No, this is really great, and I really understand why that you've got that catchment system is supposed to, that velocity is supposed to drop the sediment here and make it easier for us to scoop it out.
Absolutely. Got it.
Which it did, but it tore up the confluence there of the two drainages. That was the big problem, correct?
Yes.
But I mean, the North Pool, it did what it was supposed to do. It accepted all of that debris and sediment. How much of it went on and got into the main part of the lake? Did we know, or?
We don't.
We don't know. Okay, thank you.
There was other erosion that we'll get to as well.
Mhm.
So here's the damage inventory part. Of course, we lost the traffic bulb, but the most importantly, the hardest thing to fix is this 7,000 cubic yards that was deposited in 10 days. Like within 10 days, we had 350 cubic yards a year. And then in a couple of weeks, we had 7,000.
Yeah.
The North Pool worked, it's just we wanted to be able to wait 5 to 10 years before we had to remove the sediment. And you know that the North Pool is at its sediment capacity. We have to remove this in order to prevent sediment from getting into the rest of the lake, going up and over the North Pool spillway. So again, the 7,000 cubic yards is by far the hardest to solve and the most expensive problem to solve. The rest is basically just erosion repair and armor, but doesn't happen. Moving on with inventory. This is that bank that's in the North Pool that we saw was eroded. So that's part of the damage inventory. The velocities were just too high. I'm standing on the sediment that was deposited, taking this picture. In the middle of the lake, I'm supposed to be 12 feet underwater right now. Instead, I'm about 1 or 2 feet above water. High velocities scour this bank. We don't want to lose this bank. We believe chunks of this organic material were coming off and floating down the rest of the lake. Some of the landowners sent us pictures about that. And the North Pole Swillway is back here behind that bank. This is the sandbar or the water quality control berm. There was minor damage on that. We're not too concerned about this because that is a really big sandbar for it to lose some erosion. Okay, again, here's a picture of the North Pool. I think this is the most current drone shot we have of all of this 7,000 cubic yards estimate. Scouring here, scouring on the bottom of the panel, it needs to be repaired, and on these banks. These are supposed to be 3-to-1 slopes. Right now they're vertical, and they're just going to keep on eroding away unless we. All right, so we have a plan to make repairs. It includes building a bypass. Have to divert all flows from Power Creek and at least some of the flows from Sullivan Creek into a bypass. We're planning on getting it around the North Pool using a 42-inch HDPE pipe and a head wall here. Once that's bypassed, we can drain the North Pool rather. We can't drain the lake. We can make repairs to the erosion damage here on the traffic bulb and here on the banks and in the North Pool spillway. And then we also plan to armor all of these locations that have experienced erosion to prevent erosion in the future. We also plan to make the spillway into the lake wider, slow down the velocity. Okay. And our cost estimate today is $2 million to get all that work done. We are working with Tuolumne County OBS, Cal OES, and FEMA, try to get those funds. There is potential to get 100% funded. And I say potential with an asterisk because the FEMA process is long for some. But so far, I believe we're moving in the right direction to get some funding. That's the end of my presentation.
Director Balin.
I'm well things, but we'll start out with this. So when you guys looked at all the damage and looked at the climate instability that we're faced with, that we're in a period of disequilibrium. We don't know how long that will last, but what were the lessons learned here?
The lessons learned are that the lake is backing up a lot more because of the high. As far as an engineering standpoint, that's what we need to realize. Also, try to channelize these streams to go where we want them to. That didn't work. So the lesson learned there is let them flow where they want to flow and armor it. That way, less erosion.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. What's in our control on this? If we continue to invest in this alcohol to protect the capacity and lose any more, what is out of our control?
The intensity of rainstorms is out of our control. How much sediment comes down Sullivan Creek is out of control, out of our control. Can only mitigate that flow by armoring and try to prevent erosion from destroying what we built. We can all, with the installation of the bypass, that's something that's in our control as well, because that'll make it a lot easier to remove sediment. So if we end up having to remove sediment every few years, where the bypass that we install will be capable of being reused whenever.
Anybody else?
I've got a comment that, the addressing Phoenix Lake is going to continue to go on. It would be helpful, because in my mind, I was just trying to figure out exactly what the watershed area is for Sullivan's Creek. And most people probably wouldn't realize, I mean, it goes all the way up to at least Twinehart Lake, which means it takes on a good portion of the Twinehart community, flows down through there, as well as going all the way up to Middle Camp, over and around. If with our presentations as we're going through this, to show Phoenix Lake as a dot and show a border around what its watershed is. And with a tremendous amount like this in a short period of time, I kind of think that it's not just a little bit from everywhere in the watershed. Somebody may be missing a few thousand cubic yards of their property, that is washed into
Yeah, we have pictures of it.
Sullivan's Creek. And maybe addressing some source control. And that feeds in with the, Phoenix Lake project, is conservation of its entire watershed as well, too, to address these issues. So it's going to add a little bit larger picture to the entire Phoenix Lake ecosystem. But it would be nice to see what that watershed border actually is. That just as a spot in my presentations.
Yeah, I can add that from now on in presentations about the lake. It's very well studied because of the 2012 plan that we have. It was a very complete watershed analysis, and we have the full border.
Thank you.
Dr. Balin.
I want to say I agree with Director Boatright. I think that this 2 million, first of all, what do I know, but it seems that it's piecemeal. And, we just went through a rate increase. We're expecting our customers to pay for things. And I would like to see us pursue that larger picture so that the county is also investing in prudent ways to curtail a lot of this load that we are now, digging out and putting back to protect our investment in a partnership kind of way. So I would like to see some of the numbers coming in from the county on watershed restoration projects upstream that protects our infrastructure. I get that Phoenix is actually man-made in the 1850s, but it's naturalized, and I'm sure that Fish and Game would not approve of actual concrete hardening. We're going to have to really work with nature. And again, I like to see this number matched by what the county can commit to protecting the whole watershed. That's a good point, Director. Boatright.
Director Regan.
Well, this has been an ongoing discussion for years, because it's like when Ridgewood was developed, there wasn't any kind of real good plan put into the development for runoff, and so being a huge amount of runoff from there, and the same thing from Phoenix Lake Estates, and this has been something that's been ongoing here in the county for years and years, and now it's come home to roost, and we're getting stuck with it, and it's time to get things changed. That watershed needs to be cleaned up, and the runoff flows need to be slowed down or somehow redirected in a manner that's not going to carry debris and silt with it.
Mr. Perkins.
Not 100% Director Boatright, but sometime back, a couple of months ago, at Director Bailey's request, I sent out the Horizon Plan, chapter 2.2, I believe, to the board. Maybe the whole plan, I can't remember, at least sent you a link to it. In there is pretty good graphics. Horizon shows the Sullivan Creek watershed pretty good. But I agree, we in future presentations, we can get that out of a binder in a book and up, live stream.
Dr. Baylor?
I'd like to meet with the community. And get that, have a PowerPoint on the horizon. I think the horizon, as we understood it in our field trip, calculated the armoring and whatnot for a certain, cubic feet flow, and we doubled that within our storm event. So, maybe it's just really time that we reset and work with the county on this larger water sheet that and use Horizon maybe as a base and use the county.
I'm doing what I can to facilitate that meeting.
Director Ringen?
So from your presentation, it sounds like we're again piecemealing this project. We're just going to take care of the storm damage supposedly, and then finish the rest of the lake at some point in time in the future. Why don't we do the whole thing at one time? I just, there's a huge expense in move in, set up, and so on for the dredging and the equipment. And so you're going to do that 2-3 times? That just doesn't make good sense. I mean, the whole thing should be done at one time, period.
I don't want to argue with you. If in a perfect world, all money not being an object or an obstacle, what I think it's a little easy to say, do the whole thing all at once than to really think about what the whole thing really is and contemplate what that really is. So, piecemeal sounds like a bad word. So I don't really appreciate that, but we cannot ask FEMA to fund something that wasn't caused by the storm.
Well, I understand that, but
So therefore,
we should be beating the bushes for grant money to finish the other part.
This board knows full well that we have an application submitted for grant funding, right? This board knows that, correct?
What's the time frame on that?
I'm not sure. I just know we have one in.
We submitted that in January, and we were supposed to hear something in March. We continue to ask for updates on a weekly basis, but they haven't released the grant funding award yet. And that's with DWR.
Well, then there's this other issue. If it's done piecemeal, I know you don't like that word, but I'm going to use it anyways. Where's the spoils going to go? I mean, when's Indigene going to cut us off? I mean, you can't tell me we're going to truck it, because that would be through the roof expensive. And where would it go? I mean, that's why I say it should all be done at one time. Get it done. Stand on the gas.
Nobody disagrees with you.
But we're not going to do it.
We can do what we can do.
Richard Balin?
Yeah, and Eric, I want to respect, I know that you really tried to go, all right, we're going to just focus on this discussion, but clearly the board has a need to connect and really understand the larger picture from the ratepayers' perspective, which is to protect our investment and our customers' hard-earned dollars in this. I know that working with nature and within the that is not you guys' favorite thing or your training. I appreciate that. I'm not negative on that. I appreciate that. We are finding a perfect storm here. Things are coming home to roost. Okay, the last time this thing was dredged by the county was in the 80s. Okay. But clearly, I think the board has a need to to really look at a larger picture. And when you say what, done it all at once, I don't think Director Ringen that you're saying, okay, all in 1 year, but we need to be able to have a long-range plan, let's say a 5-year, even a 10-year plan that moves us closer to restoring the watershed. It includes culverts, hardscaping, sediment doesn't decide to leave, I mean, there's things that have been put in place innocently or not, or without environmental cumulative effects studies. Now we need to adapt everything that we know to a multiple staged project with clear funding benchmarks that we can go after. And I think that's what you mean, could be wrong about piecemeal. We tend to maybe to get the money, do what we can do, knowing that more is going to be coming downhill. And I think when we say piecemeal, I don't think it's negative. I think it's looking at a phased effort over 5 or 10 years. And we stick to that.
Better way to say it.
Yes. Yeah, phased.
So, Don, you and I have discussed several times that with all the water we got this winter, and it's not just you and I have discussed it, it's across pretty much all of California, but with all of the water that we got this year, it's a shame we couldn't capture it and hold it for later on. And that's what Phoenix Lake would, that is, that's Sonora's and Jamestown's backup for water. It is very, very important. Even a little bit of East Sonora. So that should be dredged to the maximum to get the maximum amount of water stored when we can get it, because we don't know whether we might end up in another drought, 3-year drought thing again. This weather's nuts.
Right. And yes, we've had those conversations. Looking at the bright side, you had mentioned, thank you for mentioning it, the county made an attempt to dredge the lake, and I'm going to exaggerate by a ton, but they didn't get much more than a couple of dump trucks full compared to what we did. We added 117 acre feet of storage in the lake 2 years ago. That's what this district did compared to what PG&E did nothing when they had it, and the county did minimal when they had it. But we were successful and added 117 acre feet to it this year. Now, when we do the whole thing, as you simply state, doing the whole thing, we might be able to add another 150 acre foot of storage, maybe 150 acre feet of storage. Now, I'm not pushing my nose to 150 acre feet, but what I'm referring to when I speak about this, now I'm talking about adding a few thousand acre feet of storage up higher in the elevation, so it can benefit the entire county, not just west of the lake.
The only problem is we don't have a location for that. That would be my dream too, but
well, let's have that conversation about where.
Yeah, Don, that 150 additional acre feet you spoke of, does that include the 117, or is that in addition to?
In addition to.
So, okay, almost 300 acre feet, then we could net out of this whole thing.
I was pulling that out of off my head. It's far.
That's right.
So if Eric Hall were here, he'd say, it is, we pay those exorbitant fees to DSOD, to regulate our dams. We're only permitted to store so much behind that dam before it's out of compliance with the permit. I don't know if that's an amendment that we could put in there, but anyway, there's only so much that's going to be useful in any event. We can dig a deeper hole, but the outlet is the outlet.
But I think too that would create cooler water, which would knock down the algae issue, and it would also help with the quality of the water.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Question.
Right.
Kind of circling back around to what the agenda item is, what would be the normal trigger at whatever number of years for the North Basin? What would be the amount that we would want to dredge out? If we were getting 370 a year, cubic yards a year, and then Mother Nature gave us a 7,000, that's way over and above what our normal maintenance cycle would be.
We're learning what the normal maintenance cycle is with the weather patterns and with our new lake. Based on the last 3 years, we need to dredge the lake every 3 years. So making it easier to do that is something that this project will accomplish if we are able to do it. Sorry, does that answer your question?
Well, I'm asking if the normal clean out cycle would be, say 3,000 cubic yards of material from that North Basin. So once we've accumulated, basically half of, or a little less than half of what is currently there, would that trigger a normal maintenance cycle? And are we prepared to address funding issues to make sure that that maintenance happens?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to respond in some manner, but simply stated, based on those numbers, 5 to 8 years, you'd have to go out there and evacuate 4,000 cubic yards of sediment. But what's really cool here is we're beginning to rework what's already been done. Both the Tuolumne County's water quality plan, as with respect to the Sullivan Creek watershed, and the Horizon plan, both chapter 2.2, both talk about, I just lost a word, sediment budget. I think that's kind of the word they use. So both agencies, both entities understand what Sullivan Creek is contributing, both naturally, if there were no man-made disturbances, and due to the man-made disturbances. So those two documents give us an account of how much sediment we can expect to receive into Phoenix Lake. I don't know the numbers off my head, but they're really interesting documents to read. They're lengthy to read, but they're interesting and important for us to read. I didn't answer your question, but I'm just saying that it's been studied. Smart people know how much sediment is expected to get in the Phoenix Lake and the Sullivan Creek watershed.
Under normal circumstances, not 11 atmospheric rivers.
They didn't talk about the coming 11 atmospheric rivers.
Yeah. Everybody else? Director Raymond.
So where is the spoils gonna go?
We have several sources that we can look into. Have to talk to property owners, their permission and buy-in to the project. One option, it would be in place we put the soils the last time on the Summers property and on the Indigene property. We'd have to work that out with those property owners still. We also have another source, a developer in the county that's willing to take up at all 7,000 yards. In fact, that would require trucking. So we have some options, some things that we need to look into. Make that determination.
And in the future, when the North Pool gets cleaned out, where and how will that will those spoils go?
We don't have a plan for the next time we dredge the lake.
I think one of the questions was what's within our control and what isn't earlier. And one of the things that's currently outside our control is really where would this sediment go? I mean, we know we're always going to need to maintain the basin. Is it every 5 years? Is it every 8 years? Is it every 3 years? What we currently don't have is land under ownership close to this site where we could add sediment or dispose of sediment on a maintenance interval. Right now, we need to talk with property owners, follow some other leads, but trucking is very expensive. So the best option for maintaining the lake, and even if we addressed all the watershed issues, which really is the right thing to do, we're always going to have some sediment coming down through the watershed. There's a lot of sediment already contained in the Sullivan Creek bed. So as you get scour through there, it's going to it's going to send that down into the lake for years to come anyway. But one thing that comes out of this is I hope that we really look at maybe purchasing or owning land in order to ensure maintenance of the lake. Otherwise, it's going to be every so many years, we're going to have to look, where can we take this? And there's environmental impacts associated with trucking. There's also a lot of, public relations issues with bringing trucks in and out of the Apple Valley area.
Director Bailey?
Yeah, when we were out on the field trip it was really invaluable to really see this up close and personal. I think you mentioned there was a piece of ground that is out there that's for sale.
There is, and Gadiel referenced it. It's right next to the access road in order to remove the sediment out of the North Pool. And really, we've only set this up to maintenance of the lake really is cleaning out the North Basin. If the North Basin is operating and functioning correctly, that is where all the sediment collects. And the answer to your question in terms of how frequently really is we need to look and see when it loses function. Once that North Pool is so full that the velocities are too high and it's carrying over and broadcasting the sediment through the rest of the lake, then we need to clean it out. And it does a survey every year of how much sediment's accumulated in there. And there is a trigger point. We just don't know. I can't answer the question right now, but there is a trigger point to, okay, it's lost function. We need to get in there and clean it out. Yeah, there's land right next to this location that would be the most cost effective. I don't know Gadiel's cost estimate with FEMA. I think it presumes we're going to be able to find close place to deposit these spoils. If we have to go off site and truck, that $2 million price tag goes up pretty dramatically.
Question that goes with that. The property, and not to push something into the future, is that at a higher elevation than the lake or a lower elevation? i.e., are we just creating a, potential future problem? And how would we'd have to address not allowing that material to come back into the ecosystem?
Yeah, so basically the same thing we did last time. We had to stabilize the soil so it wouldn't erode anymore. Do that by hydroseeding, the normal methods, but also just making it not as steep. Keep your slopes as shallow as possible. It all prevents erosion from getting back into Power Creek or Chicken Creek and then back. And that was pretty successful, as a matter of fact. 50,000 cubic yards that we placed and stabilized. Great.
Director Ringen, you had a question?
Yeah. So during this monsoon that we experienced, did it affect the tower?
What?
The outlet, the tower?
We don't believe so. Eric, you're here, he'd answer, but he pays close attention to that. We don't believe so. It's compromised already just because it's 100 some odd years old, but
well, I realize that, and that was going to be the second part of my question, but did the outlet experience sediment?
Oh, I got your question, and thank you for the question. One of the things that I, as an operator, I was a water treatment plant operator for a bunch of years, most of my career here. And one of the things I heard about this story that I was at least skeptical, be polite, I was skeptical. I didn't think it was going to help that much. So we use clarity of the water in terms of turbidity, right? Turbidity is a unit of measurement of how much sediment is in the water, particulates in water. Before this project, those sorts of storms we've had, we called them Pineapple Expresses. Now they have a fancier name. During those storms and previous, it was not uncommon to see units of turbidity in the hundreds, 700, 800, maybe even 900. I think after I left, I saw 1,000 units of turbidity. That's mud. That is as muddy as the Mississippi River. It's terrible.
And for context, Don, tell us what TUD is required to get that down to for
Yeah.
consumption.
0.025. So some tiny, you gotta, anyways, thank you.
Long
But,
ways to go.
a long way to go. So I heard that this North Pool and this channeling was gonna fix that. I didn't give it much chance. Now, I'm here to tell you, in your operations report that you receive on the monthly basis, one of the things you see is the peak turbidity, all those source waters, including Sonora. I think I saw a peak, I'm gonna have to go back, of like 60. Not 700, not 800, but 60. So obviously the North Pool is working and the rest of the lake is working perfectly because you're getting very, very good water at the Sonora Water Treatment Plant and everywhere else.
So the second part of my, excuse me, my question was going to be when is that outlet, the tower, going to be replaced or renovated? And the way I understand it, here's the tower and here's the silt, and that's not a good deal.
It's not a good deal, there's a few ways to answer that question. One is, we have a budget, and we have lots of needs, right? Millions and millions of dollars in needs. So we just got to prioritize these things. So that's that. The other thing is, getting back to your comment about do the whole thing.
Yeah,
Well, part of doing the whole thing is removing that sediment from that tower.
right.
And that's a high priority of Air Calls and everybody else's. So we want to get it done.
Boy, find the grant, stand on the gas, make it happen.
Okay, any other comments from the directors? If not, we'll open it up to public comment. You see Sally's got her hand up there, Corey. Anybody, nobody else? Sally's first anyway, right? Okay. Floor is yours, Sally.
Thank you. First of all, just a couple of questions regarding the discussion of the damage. And I think that discussion among the board and the engineers was really interesting and really helpful. So I'm so glad it was on the agenda. But in the assessment of the damage, you have a lot of information about the North Pool. Can Gadiel tell us how that calculation of the 7,000 square foot, 7,000 cubic yards was done? How do you make that calculation?
All right, you just asked an engineer how he measured and calculated something.
Yeah,
Very
right up your alley.
So it's a rough estimate. We did not hire a surveyor to do a bathymetric survey or do penetrating radar, which we have before in the North Pool, but we didn't do that here. It's very expensive. I have a drone photo of the area. I can scale that photo, get the area of the sediment that we see. We can assume the slope of the sediment going all the way down to the bottom. And we also know the elevation of the water and the elevation of our bottom. So between the area and the height of that sediment, those are the two things you need to calculate a volume of sediment.
Okay, and then that sounds great. Now, did your drone go look for any sediment buildup in other places like the South Pool in particular that's gotten very shallow?
No, the drone can't see that far underwater. So there's more sediment in the South Pool. That's a far way for that sediment to be going.
Well, just part of the discussion so far understandably focuses on the North Pool, and there's no question that your assessment of where the damage was makes perfect sense. 2 points of concern for me are that there was definitely muddy, turbulent stuff headed into the main body of the lake throughout the storms. And whether it was of importance with additional sediment deposited in the rest of the lake is a question I've asked. And I realize that you can't see with the drone if there was money to be had to help get more sediment out of the lake. Would it be of value to have sampling done in the other areas of the lake and compared to what Horizon originally did? So you would actually be able to tell OEC, well, this is the change in the sampling. And so the sediment, extra sediment that we could get the money from the emergency guys to take it out and sort of get an extra edge in getting the money? Or did you just assume that looking for that problem in the rest of the lake wasn't going to be worth it?
So the assumption is that most of the sediment was deposited into the North Pool.
Mm.
By the time the sediment gets up and over the North Pool spillway, it's going to be lighter sediment, like suspended in water column form. Yes, it does settle out in other places like the East Pool and the South Pool, for those of you that are intimately familiar with the anatomy of the lake. We know that happens. We know that happens every year. The best way to handle that is to form the rest of the dredging project that the Phoenix Lake Plan recommends. If some of the heavier sediment did get up and over the North Pool, the chances are that it floated down to the bottom of the Central Pool, because the velocities are very slow, and that's also the deepest part of the lake. That's on the north side of the sandbar.
That deep channel? That deep channel?
Yeah, the deep channel and then where it opens up. So let's share screen, go back to my PowerPoint. Just real quick here. So if sediment did get up and over the North Pool spillway here, it probably settled out mostly right here, honestly. And then it could have settled out in this is the deepest part of the lake. And I mean, the real answer to your question is no, we haven't measured how much sediment and what the difference is out here in the East Pool and the South Pool, being this area here. That would be very expensive and difficult to measure. And again, like I said, the assumption is that the vast majority of the sediment settled out in the pool.
Okay. And I understand saying, gee whiz, if it's there, leave it for the other project. Just feeling like the money for the dredging of the South and the East pools is being requested of people with a lower budget than OEC. Okay, the second question about the damage assessment was and the repair was this bypass. Can you get that image up? Sullivan Creek bypass.
Here, I have a better image for you. Stop sharing.
Lovely, lovely. Well, you drew it in, yeah.
Thought I had a better image for you.
Well, you had one drawing that was, yeah.
There it is. Here we go.
Okay, so that bypass, is that something that you're proposing to put in that's permanent?
Yes.
Well, okay, so when Horizon did its original assessment, Sullivan Creek watershed was up to 80% of the inflow of sediment. And like you said, we have little control over what's coming downstream. But if you put in that bypass, won't it, as volume builds and speed builds of the water, isn't it just going to avoid the North Pool and come down the bypass?
Yeah, great question. I failed to mention that at the head of the bypass here, we're planning on putting a valve to open and close when we want it to.
Okay. Because it's just, yeah, the potential for the bypass pipe to send garbage downstream is accentuated with that drawing. And if the valve is supposed to hold it all away.
Yes, we'll only open that valve during low flows. So we won't have to worry so much about sediment getting into the pipe and getting into the rest of the lake.
Uh-huh.
And that's when we'll do work North Pool.
Okay. Well, thank you. And then coming back to what a number of board members were getting to, and I appreciate the fact that you guys wanted to concentrate on the damage done and the repair to be done, which makes sense, is the bigger picture. And the concept of the fact that the watershed is out there and is a whole big area that other resources should be actively helping with, probably. My concern is that we have this huge snowpack that's going to melt and it's going to come down in this watershed. So while this winter we got to have these atmospheric rivers, now we are facing the spring and summer where there's going to be a snowpack melt. And the question is, should there be a plan to have more water storage in Phoenix Lake? Relook at these levels that are quote permitted because of the number one, the value of capturing the water. Number two, the fact that it's coming anyway. And number three, that it is it's kind of a necessity to make a plan for that on top of everything else you're trying to do. And so as a result of all those kinds of questions about watershed and storing the sediment and everything else, don't we need to have a new working plan of the big picture for this? I came to Don right after all the storms to say, as crazy as it sounds, the Phoenix Lake Preservation and Restoration Project Plan was great for its time, but we've now introduced a whole nother layer of stuff to be dealt with that has to have a bigger picture, bigger plan, especially since even if we do all of what you say and get a whole bunch of dump stuff next year, finding the money to constantly take this stuff out and put it somewhere is just an undertaking that, you know, TUD's got a lot of other work to do. So a revisit to the total plan and the phases it needs and how it's to be funded probably has to be done sometime soon. But I appreciate, you know, what you've gotten so far. And there's no question, a lot of stuff came downstream. I sent the pictures of the boot that had its running stuff in and what a mess that was. So we just got quite an increase in that watershed input. And no question, Sullivan's the big guy, but it's going to continue from other areas, and it's going to be a sediment problem of a different proportion than I think Horizon planned for. Thank you.
I got a question, Gaddy Ellen. It's kind of a follow-up to something that Sally mentioned. Do we know if we have a significant snowpack in the Sullivan Creek Basin now?
Great question. I know that there's snow up in Ewok.
Yeah, there's still some, I know, but I'm just wondering if we even track that. I mean, it may not be something we've tracked in years past. I'm just curious.
Claire, you said snowpack.
Yeah, because that's what Sally mentioned was snow runoff and whatnot.
Oh, I didn't hear.
Correct, Sally? That's what you brought.
That's right. And yesterday there was some stuff in the news about, you know, how the people are trying to figure out with the snowpack, what are the rivers that are going to be most affected? Because they're really concerned about the Central Valley getting a lot of snowpack runoff. So curious about how much we are going to get and what we plan for. There are other people who are supposed to figure all that out.
Yeah. What is the highest point in the Sullivan Creek drainage? Any idea?
Well, Lakewood is 4,300.
Yeah, and wherever Middle Camp intersects the highway up just above Lakewood is like the upper reaches of the watershed.
Okay.
So,
So realistically, probably not all that significant, really. And okay.
All the rain that we got.
So it doesn't go all the way to Big Hill up there. It doesn't go up Big Hill Road. It doesn't go all the way up to the top there.
It does. However, depending on where you are on Big Hill, it misses Phoenix Lake. You know, it's a kind of a teardrop shape.
Sure.
As you go up. But yeah, that would be the upper elevation, that Big Hill ridge line all the way over to where Middle Camp intersects the highway.
Okay. All right. Ron?
Yeah, I think it's going to be relatively minimal. What has already happened is gotten in the ditches and in the creeks and all that, and it's pretty much over with, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is some sort of snowpack still up that's above, up above, it'll probably end up in the ditches, and that can be controlled, you know.
Yeah.
To a certain extent anyways.
Good question, Sally. David, yes.
You know, Sally reminded me of one thing we didn't ask so far. What about the buoyant debris? In the video, we've seen a lot of wooden material and organic material
The basketball.
that would have floated by the North Basin. But, you know, could have been, yeah, I didn't specifically see that.
Yeah, it's hard to see in the video,
But,
but, what about it?
yeah, well, is there some way to address that? Because that is also directly related to storm damage. If we hadn't had the storms, we wouldn't have had that amount of debris. But where, hey, was it the entire shoreline? Is it still floating out there until it becomes non-buoyant and then sinks and becomes part of sediment in other portions?
So, yeah, a lot of debris came down. Like decks were falling over and things like that at one point. Some of that, a lot of that ends up in Phoenix Lake. I know that the main issue with the debris that was happening is over by the spillway, where we have the big orange buoys that block the debris from going over the spillway and pouring the spillway. And that was backing up a little bit. If you recall, we're here, you can talk about more how big that problem was and what they do. But that was the main problem as far as what we saw in Phoenix Lake. Not so much debris in the North Pool.
But does any part of what we're currently asking FEMA for address cleanup of, you know, the debris that's still floating out there in the lake somewhere? Or
That's a good idea. No, it doesn't.
that certainly, you know, the North Pool is, you know, one thing, and that is being addressed in the 2 million, but let's not forget to look at, you know, potentially because of the way it has to be cleaned up, it could be very costly to clean up the organic material or the buoyant material that's come into the lake as well.
Dr. Bailey.
Yeah, I'm just speaking for myself and for direction, but it seems to me that the overall savings is in a more of a comprehensive way of addressing, you know, community-wide way of addressing our watershed, you know, quality water, of course. And I noticed through my news feeds that Governor Newsom signed the 30, you know, the 30 by 2030, probably you're familiar with that. But these guys are serious about that type of a multiple benefit approach and nature-based approach, using nature to help us solve our problems and keeping this watershed reliable. And I sent Dawn this, it was tribal nature-based solution programs where there's just a ton of money going into programs that will work with nature in the watershed to help deliver good clean water for us. And in just looking at the Fish and Wildlife, they're announcing 200 million in new grant funding under drought, climate, and nature-based solution and initiatives. I won't read it, but Dawn, I sent it to you because it's for a multiple benefit approach to this. And it seems like we could hitch our wagons, not only to FEMA, but to a more of a comprehensive management. I can't really call them solutions, but I can call them, you know, a management, nature-based management approach. What we don't know what lies ahead of us, and look at this more as a comprehensive, more multiple pots coming into it, but the community not so scattered in their individual stuff, but really focusing on this for the future. It's an idea. Be glad to send this Department of Wildlife. I just sent you the link on it. That'd be something we can put in the pot, so we're not, so that we have a comprehensive idea of where.
Anything else? Any other hands up there, Corey?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. Well, Don, you got any final comments before we wrap this up?
Good discussion. I appreciate
Very
it.
good.
Sally, appreciate your comments and just know that your staff does care about longevity of the lake, the health of the lake. It means a lot to us. So I don't want it to feel like, you know.
Okay, as stated earlier, this is not an action item. It's just for discussion purposes only. So thank you again, Sally, for your input. We appreciate it. And it was a very good discussion. Very good. So we'll go ahead and move on. Melissa.
Correct, they do, and they have 2 tanks as well.
I just, my question was, why couldn't we have placed that tank in a little better location so that you could get another tank on there in the future if you needed to?
But we kind of crossed that bridge in the design process when we had a pretty thorough discussion with the board about that, executing that agreement with MIWOC and what the implications were to the design. But to your point, SPI owns more land. They've been very easy to deal with. If we needed to, I think there's a high likelihood we could acquire more land. At the time when we acquired this, we evaluated putting 2 tanks on that site and decided to go with 1 because of the cost savings to the district's ratepayers and the ability to have multi-benefit with this interconnection agreement with MIWOC. So in an emergency, we can feed them water, they can feed us water. In a planned maintenance scenario, they can provide the storage. We really only need that storage for a period of a few months, every 15 years or so, when this tank would need to be recoded. So it seemed like the most cost-effective way to move forward with a sustainable maintenance plan for these tanks, which is a constant issue for us, is how are we going to take tanks out of service to recode them every, say, 15, maybe even 20 years.
Yeah, I remember that conversation too. That was one of the reasons why we decided to go with a 400,000 gallon tank, replacing the 210,000 gallon tank.
And we were replacing some storage that was lost with the Zone 3 tank.
Correct.
As well.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I'd like to, pass it over to Elizabeth. She's our assistant engineer. She's, like I said, she's been working on this for about 1.5 years or so. And one of the first projects she's actually was handed when she got here. She's done a fantastic job, and she can, I'm sure, answer any questions you may have.
Okay, well, I'll provide a few more background details just for Director Jacobs and also the public. I know the board has seen this information. The Zone 4 tank shown on this exhibit will be a 400,000 gallon steel welded tank that will replace, as Eric said, the existing White Fur tank, which is 210,000 gallons, and consolidate the volume from the 125,000 gallon Zone tank that collapsed in 2021. The existing White Fur tank was built by the Sugar Pine Water Company. It's in poor condition and close proximity to several residences. It's also not on our property. It's on some easements which are in 2 homeowners' backyards. The new tank will be on our property, a bigger site. See that site layout on that exhibit? It shows a light grading profile for plan view. And see how we can drive around the tank. The current tank right now, you can't even drive up to it. So it's much easier for maintenance. The current pump station doesn't have a generator or an automatic transfer switch. The new pump station will have both of those, which will increase service reliability during power outages and save operator time. The new tank will also be up to our current specifications, which includes concrete ring wall, external roof rafters, cathodic protection, a stairway. The pump station will have 2 pumps for redundancy. And also, Eric mentioned that interconnection with MIWOC Village Mutual Water Company. So we'll have the ability to make the tank in 15. They will supply water to our customers for several months. And then
Oh, is that? I'm sorry. Yeah. It's a problem when you have somebody like me driving. Okay.
Okay, so this project was budgeted for the fiscal year 2023 with $1,370,267. That budget included geotax surveying, CEQA compliance, tree clearing, grading, tank construction, pump station construction, connections to the existing system, and also the removal of the existing tank and pump station. The construction contract before you today was circulated for bids on February 28th. And the scope of that contract is just the tank itself, including all appurtenances, the ring wall foundation, cathodic protection, interior and exterior coatings. Staff has identified Resource Development Company as the lowest responsive bidder with $837,100. We have not worked with RDC before. We looked into their contractor licenses, their Department of Industrial Relations registration. Talked to a few references in Truckee Meadows Water Authority and the City of Sacramento. The Truckee Meadows Water Authority said that they have over 100 tanks in their system, and RDC has done about 2/3 of those tanks. So RDC is their main tank contract. They do great work and are great partners. That $837,100 number is within our existing total project budget that was budgeted for the fiscal year of 2023, which was that $1,070,000. And one important thing to note there is, although it's within the total project budget, that was for fiscal year 2020. And most of this work is going to be in fiscal year 2024, which means that we'll have to budget over $1 million next year. Eric, do you have any?
I just want to add one thing anecdotally. So we internally in the engineering department, we usually kind of take bets on how these bid results are going to come back. And so we put them up on the whiteboard. It's kind of fun. But so I estimated something I'm ashamed to even say much lower than this, because the good thing about the way we construct tanks is that it's really just the tank contractor putting up the tank. TUD does all the site work. We do all the underground work. So we've got this hybrid approach, which really is the most efficient way to deliver a tank. Nevertheless, I assumed this was just the tank. It's going to be less. Elizabeth had estimated, and she had excluded a few things, but she was much closer to the actual bid cost of this tank. So she was not surprised by the bid results. I somewhat was, but the takeaway here is that our CIP, which Gadiel was heavily involved in doing the cost estimates, has 3% inflation built in. And he, with the 3% inflation and the cost estimates in our CIP, we're pretty close on this particular project, which is the good news, because we all know that steel and coatings and other things have gone up in price, and they're pretty volatile. But nevertheless, we were very pleased to see that our CIP, with its inflation adjustments, kept us in budget, will keep us in budget on this project.
Good. Director Ringen.
So, yeah, I've never heard of this resource development company. And when I read through this agenda item, I was kind of concerned about the spread of the bids. And I started to get sort of a stomachache thinking about Phoenix Lake Road paving job. And so I'm glad to hear that it seems like you've done a pretty fair amount of checking around about them to see that they are going to be able to perform exactly the way that we want them to. So that's good, but it's still, I get a little squeegee there about somebody you've never heard of and being the lowest bidder.
Director Bailey.
Yeah, so this is a kind of a hybrid approach, which you said was really efficient. So what are TUD's costs in addition to this cost?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah,
Sorry.
so we have tree clearing, grading. We're also doing the pump building, all of the on-site piping around the tank and off-site. And then there will be paving the trench off-site, and then removal of the existing Whiteford tank and pump station. And completed already is the CEQA compliance, geotech, surveying.
Is that reflected on the CIP?
Yes, yes. So we have budgeted $1,370,000, and that takes into account all of that, what's already been paid and all of those future costs.
Okay, so ours is,
No, it's closer to 400.
Just quick clarification, all of the funding is out of TUD's cost. When we look at that 1.3, it's what we consider more like our cash expense, which is, I think, what you were asking. Our labor is already a fixed expense, and so it's not reflected in all of those costs. So between the CEQA, which is a consultant, between the tree clearing, which is a contractor, between who's building the actual pump building itself, will probably have a contract. So all those added up is our budget, but our own labor is not included in that.
it's just force account.
Correct.
Because we're paying that no matter what.
Correct.
Director Ring.
So I think I heard you say that it's gonna have a generator there also. So I'm assuming that would be propane powered, okay, then will that automatically start up so that we don't have to send somebody up there to fire it up?
Yes, so that's a big plus with this new pump station. Current one doesn't even have a generator. So now we'll have a generator and an automatic transfer switch on site.
Great.
Director Boatright.
With a 15-year life cycle for maintenance disruption on the tank, what is the estimated life cycle of a newly designed tank?
We should be able to get, with proper maintenance, 80 years out of a welded tank if it's, if it's maintained properly. And with the new coatings are, 25 mils in the past, fairly recent past, we were installing like 14, 15 mils. So they've gotten thicker coating system, even though the VOC and the air board requirements make them constantly reformulating coatings. But with the thickness of the steel and the thickness of the coating, and if it's done on a proper maintenance interval, we should be able to get that duration out of the welded tank.
Director Ring.
Yeah, and I think too, Elizabeth said that it's gonna have exterior rafters. That's a biggie. And then too, it probably will have that ventilation system, correct? Yeah, so that should add a lot of life to that tank.
And the cathodic protection as well, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, Director Boatright, you beat me to the question and I think I know the answer. So thank you for the question, but I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this. And one, I repeat myself, but I'm really proud of you for you've been here just a little over a year and what you're able to accomplish, and you're doing a great job. One of the other thing that Elizabeth took on, she volunteered for, was to take over what I started a few years ago, the tank master plan. And she's doing a fantastic job collaborating with all of us. This is one way in that we are trying to transfer all this knowledge that we have right onto Elizabeth. So this can be this knowledge, information that we've gained over all these years can, move beyond this generation of TUD employees. So remember last time we met, for some reason, I mentioned how many years of practical TUD experience we have here. We're blessed to have here at TUD. Well, nothing more important than the knowledge we have about these tanks and what we've learned over all these decades with how tanks are constructed and how they are maintained. And, I would have said 100 years. I say that because I've seen tanks that when I got here were 20 years old that were refurbished tanks last 40 years without any real maintenance. So you're going to get 80 years out of this tank. Part of the discussion, going back to somebody's question about the generator fuel type, I don't know that we've settled on propane just yet. We may have.
I thought we had, but if we haven't. we
Yeah.
can discuss that.
We're gonna discuss that. There's advantages to propane and there's disadvantages to propane and there's advantages to diesel and disadvantages. So it's worthy of a discussion at each and every site, whether or not we go with propane or not. Again, we've learned so much about these tanks over all these years. I feel like, we understand. We just got an award. I say just now, it's been several years from a Clare Hill Award on design of a tank. So that's just a credit to your district and your staff on the amount of knowledge we have. Oh yeah, I know what I want to go. So each tank, each time we approach, let's say a new tank, we go through this evaluation. We're gonna sit down, we're gonna talk as a group. Is this tank need to be steel welded or can it be steel bolted? A steel bolted tank is a one-time use tank. I think I can say that with almost certainty. It's a one-time use tank. Lasts 35 to 40 years. As I just said, we've had some crappy tanks last that long. So, but they're a one-time use tank. So sometimes it's appropriate, depending on the situation, to build a one-time use tank because we know it, we feel like knowing at the end of that life cycle, it's going to be replaced upstream or in some other manner by a different tank or less or a reservoir some manner. Other times, in this case, this is a forever tank, so it needs to last many life cycles. So each and every time we go through this, we're going to sit down as a team and evaluate, just what sort of tank we're going to construct. We're probably going to, for your knowledge, and so you're not shocked somewhere down the road, we're probably going to consider a concrete tank at some point in the future. So anyway.
Thank you, Don. Any other? Yeah, Director Jacobs.
Just a general question. In the next 3 to 5 years, how many tanks do we anticipate needing to replace? Have a feel for that.
I don't, Don might have off the top of his head, but 18, yeah, it was a lot, 18.
Is that a have to or a want to?
It's a should.
It's a should.
It's a strong
all right,
should.
I'll take that.
However, a lot of them depend on Sierra Pines, on being able to consolidate storage too. And if we are unable to consolidate storage at the upper elevation with a concrete tank or something like that, we will be faced with even more than 18 that will need to, they'll time out and they'll need to be replaced on site or very close to with land acquisition and additional CEQA. So we're really working hard on Sierra Pines so that we have a path forward to consolidate. There'll always be tanks that we need to replace or rehabilitate on site.
To be more clear, it isn't, I didn't mean to insinuate that we were going to replace 18 tanks with 18 tanks. There's just 18 tanks in the next 5 years that I feel like we really need to address, whether that's replace, rehab, consolidate, something along those lines. But again, every one of those, we're going to go through this evaluation process and decide what's the best path forward. But the 18 I'm referring to are most critical as far as the condition goes.
So a follow-up question. Would there be the advantage to perhaps teaming with a provider to partner with them? Maybe saves some cost savings if they participated in our 5-year plan.
There's been that discussion in the past. There was a company that was formed with that intent to do like packages of plants for public agencies. And I think there is an ability to achieve some economy of scale and cost savings. But in our case, I think we talked about it the last meeting, is we pay as we go on our CIP program. So we basically are budgeting enough money for the next 12-month duration. And so to be able to really lock in, say, a 5-year contract with a tank builder, we would need to have a little more clarity on our finances going forward. And so we haven't ever done that, but it's certainly something we can look at once we get our arms around the critical tanks that are about ready to fall down, if you will. Then to get into a maintenance agreement, that may be a better place for the district to be in, more proactive rather than reactive.
There's a pretty big chunk of business, so it should be attractive to partnering with folks that do that.
It is.
And sure, another follow-up question. This is related to not just this project, but just in general. A lot to learn. So for my education, do we have anything in our contract, this contract specifically, and then general, to provide incentives for the contractor to get the project done under budget, at a schedule, minimal change orders? Do we have any those kind of incentives built in?
We don't on this particular contract. The only thing that we have is more like a punitive measure. It's a liquidated damages that Elizabeth could assess if they go over their contract time. I think what you're talking about is one layer, be more incentivized rather than drop the hammer and be punitive. And on these particular projects, they aren't overly complex. For the Sierra Pines project or for something like the Sonora Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, I think that incentives are a good tool for us, especially when those, as we can see with the wastewater plant, we're 8 months behind schedule. When you start talking about that kind of thing, and Caltrans uses them a lot. So not on this contract, on future contracts for larger projects that have more complexity, I think that that's something the district should look at.
Any other comments? Corey, anything out there in public comment?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. Director Balin?
I was ready to make a motion.
You bet.
I move to authorize the general manager to execute a construction agreement with Resource Development Company for the zone change project in the amount of $837,100 and authorize the district engineer to approve change orders up to but not to exceed $42,000, approximately 5% of the contract amount.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the contract, or to go ahead and award the contract. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Okay, passes 4-0, 5-0.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, Barbara.
Yeah. I just want to thank you, Elizabeth, for your really comprehensive oversight on this project. It's really great to hear it. And also Gaddy, all the same, thanks for that PowerPoint. And you fielding all the board's questions. Appreciate both of you.
Also, just to echo the commendations. It appears that on the Phoenix Lake project that it worked as designed. The sediment was captured of an issue getting resolved, but just commendations to the design team and everybody associated with designing that. Successful. Also, commendation for kind of handing things down, mentoring, providing the continuity as a group. I want to general manager, all those involved in that.
All right, well, move on to staff reports.
I'll be brief. On the 29th of March, I think almost all of us attended the reclamation luncheon, our annual required reclamation luncheon. I think it was a success. On the 5th of April, I attended the Tuolumne County Natural Resources Committee meeting, and I gave a little bit of an update to them on the regional wastewater treatment facility that you just provided us prior to that. And then I also updated them on, or gave them kind of a look ahead at what we hope to happen at Sierra Pines, that regional plant. Also, yesterday, Director Boatwright and I attended the Tuolumne County Special District Association meeting. It's good meetings, our second meeting, I think, since the formation, and you can chime in too, but the majority of the discussion was centered around LAFCO and how this association can help LAFCO along. LAFCO seems to be struggling and maybe for good reason. I don't know what the good reasons are, but it sounds like for good reason they're struggling. So we're just trying to figure out how we can help the association, help LAFCO get moving. We were supposed to attend is at the conclusion of that meeting at 4 o'clock was supposed to be a LAFCO meeting, but it was unfortunately canceled. That's the end of my report.
Okay. Anybody else from staff? Abby?
Good morning. Just a quick reminder that this weekend is the Home and Garden Show, Tuolumne County Home and Garden Show. And so various staff members will be, and Director Ringen will be manning the booth there on Saturday and Sunday. So anyone that wants to come learn a little bit about what projects we're up to and some history about the district, we'll have a lot of information out there. And we'll be happy to talk with anyone that's interested in the district at that time. Thank you.
Just wanted to pass along to the board that last year, the board authorized award of a $1.4 million contract to Moyle Excavation. This is for the Ridgewood Intertie projects pipeline up Phoenix Lake Road from Resort Road all the way up a portion of Ridgewood Drive. And we awarded that last year, but the contractor's finally ready to get started. So next Monday is kind of officially the start of that. So you'll see some activity on that road as well. Our own crews are doing some water main replacement up in Upper Ridgewood. So you may hear a little grumblings from the public about impacts as well. The county has a project on Phoenix Lake Road later this summer. So we're coordinating with them and making sure that the public messages are out, as well as the message boards, the sign boards out there to alert the public that there's going to be some delays.
Okay, Steve?
I guess I'll just chime in. I think it feels like you heard a whole bunch from me last Thursday, so you probably don't want to hear much more, but you know, we're staying with everything. Just a reminder to the board, we're looking at the 27th for the notices to be mailed out to all the customers. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, bring it back to the board. Director Boatright.
A little bit of follow-up. Dawn and I attended the Tuolumne County Special Districts Association meeting yesterday. So we actually flip-flopped. There were 5 items on the agenda that we went through. Items A and B we swapped, and it was discussion regarding the LAFCO recommendation related to determining term lengths and the process for filing midterm vacancies for the special district member seat. So the discussion for item A and B centered around the way LAFCO voting members are. We actually have 2 votes. We have a fixed seat and we have a at-large seat that is voted for by the special districts in our county. The fixed seat is a rotating seat that goes between Twinehart Community Services District, Tuolumne Utilities District, and Groveland Community Services District. Next year in May, it will actually rotate to Twinehart?
Groveland.
Oh, thank you. To Groveland? Okay, so it rotates to Groveland. And that will be a 4-year term. And then after Groveland, it will rotate to Twinehart and then rotate back to the district. During these discussions, for purposes of LAFCO, Director Balin at the time, President Balin, asked me if I wanted to, take over for Director Ringen going to LAFCO. I said, sure, and there really wasn't. I think what we will see shortly into the future is a authorization or paperwork going on to actually kind of back that up, to designate a director from one of the 3 boards that has a rotation at the time. To specifically, this is the director that is there, because there's a 3rd seat, and that is the alternate. The alternate is burdened with the responsibility of staying up with all of the LAFCO meetings, with the current items on the agenda, and doesn't actually get a vote unless one of the two designated, either the fixed seat or the at-large seat, is not present at the meeting. It kind of brought up, and there was a little bit, Director Kearns has actually filled in for me for a meeting at LAFCO and all that, but there's actually not the mechanism to allow that to happen. The designated director, if they're not up, then the vote passes on to the alternate. Which the alternate is kind of a second at-large voted seat by all of the special districts in Oldham County. So, moving forward, there's going to be a little bit more feedback on that, and a little bit more clarification as to how that actually works. The Special Districts Association is definitely driving forward with the, emphasis on helping, our local LAFCO to move forward, to see if things can get moved through LAFCO in a more timely fashion. Certainly there are some things on the LAFCO agenda that have just been burdened with a number of years, trying to work through the LAFCO process. So they want to see how they can help streamline that process and bringing in more effort to do that. And the second portion of it was the at-large seat. By majority of how many special districts we know are in Tuolumne County, and the number of special districts that have decided to put forward the letter to actually join this association formally. And that's all it takes is basically a board, formalizing in a letter, we want to be part of the Tuolumne County Special Services District Association. We put John Ferriani back into to continue in the seat of the at-large position for LAFCO board. And then other things that will be coming down, we'll get into it real deep. There is a measure on the November 24 ballot that will greatly affect how Proposition 218 is done. And it has a retroactive clause that will affect any Proposition 218 going back to January of 22. I haven't read the regulation measure. It's one of those measures that I am sure that has special districts will take the position of not wanting to see it go through. It will increase the difficulty of Proposition 218. It also contains anybody that's done a rate increase through a 218 process for the last, at this point, year and a half. By the time the measure is on the ballot, it will be 2 years in retro. CARB, which is the Air Resources Control Board, they're increasing, their power and their authority, and they're forcing government, as I understand it, government agencies and special districts to, push towards an electric. Sure exactly how an electric dump truck works or how efficient it works, but that is the kind of proposed regulation. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, David. Director Rainey.
Okay. On 3/29, I, along with 3 other board members, attended the TUD reclamation users meeting. I thought it was run real well, was well attended, and some good information was handed out by the staff. On 4/5, attended the Ptolemy County Natural Resources Committee meeting. And I brought up, and I think they're going to follow through on this. I brought up that I had seen an article in the Union Democrat about some sort of forestry group that is suing the Forest Service for using fire retardant, dropping fire retardant. And this is the third time they've sued. They lost the first two. And I don't know, I thought that the Natural Resource Committee should take up a conversation on it, do some background investigating on it, and find out just how much of a hazard fire retardant is to the watershed and to the fish. My own personal opinion is that we need every tool in the toolbox so we can get ahead of the forest in order to knock down fires. So anyway, they're going to take that up. And then on 4/6, I with all the rest of the board members attended our TUD special board meeting and talked finances. So that's it for me.
Dr. Balin?
Yes, the reclamation, thank you, Abby, and all your team for putting that on. And this week I have a Mountain Counties Water Resources Association board meeting up in Placer. It's an in-person board meeting, and we usually have a tour. So kind of a nice recruitment effort about their district. So we have those I think twice a year, and this year we're gonna go. That's Thursday. And we have a board meeting.
Okay.
So I'll report that.
Great, thank you. Director Jacobs, do you have anything to report?
Other than last Thursday's meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I was also at the reclamation luncheon and always enjoy those. Also, I attended the April 4th Board of Supervisors meeting when they appointed Director Jacobs, and General Manager Perkins was there with me. That's all I have. So if that's it, we'll go ahead and adjourn the